Oh, the fan really dries out your eyes. You're trying not to blink.
I mean, man, I just drank water, so my upper lip is wet. Is it obvious? No,
No.
not obvious. I wanted to wipe it, but camera's on. Like freeze. But yeah, we're starting in a bit.
Ooh, I don't know how.
I'm not even muted yet. Yeah.
I have a download that's still in progress, so I don't know if it's gonna affect things.
It probably will.
Okay, let's get our things.
Let's get dangerous.
Oh, Tilly, you're quoting Darkwing Duck. So romantic.
Seems applicable given our topic tonight is
Let's
horror.
get dangerous.
Not really, but yeah. Okay, monitor is running in Facebook. Monitor is running in YouTube.
I'm still for sharing.
I still feel that we're dark. And I know it feels like sunog lighting, but it still feels like we're dark. I think we need more lighting.
Oh my god.
You've never really had a studio shoot, have you?
I've been in the studio.
So you've seen how
I've been in several.
you've seen how super blindingly bright those places get.
Yes. I do have a calendar.
You do have what?
Wait.
You do have what?
No.
Was it like a full photo shoot?
Yes. With fake sweat. It's just a spray bottle of
A
water.
topic that you can suggest.
No.
Um,
You're just grabbing the Facebook link. I heard the YouTube link.
I'm trying to find that group chat we had with everyone religiously watching the show before. It's turning into a little mailing list I wanted to use, but now I can't find it. But it's not this one.
But it doesn't
It's
have a
just
name.
3 of them.
Mm-mm.
There was a larger group before. Huh. Where did it go? Where did that go? I shall name it. But yes, we are starting very soon. Just finalizing. Oh no, it's a smaller group. Oh, there, here it is. So I'll call this.
I'm gonna watch my download for a while. Because it's a website backup.
Okay. And then I can send it there. Yeah, I don't see it. I'll have to search it. Wow, it's not here.
But you just named it, so it's
Yeah.
probably too soon.
That's frustrating.
Or you have to refresh the tab because it doesn't reflect the new stuff. It's
Here,
still
you see
using
it now.
a cached thingamabob.
But who cares? No big deal.
I don't know how you got to this line, you know. Like,
You said thingamabobs.
I want to kill the airplane so much.
Gonna regret it.
Nope. So as usual, if you are watching, do say hello.
Mhm.
Let us know you're there.
As always, we cannot see if you are watching unless you comment. Such is the challenge of free live streaming solutions.
Yes. Oh, NORAD sound.
Oh, I realize yeah, I won't be able to display them all later.
No, there are too many books. You just have to bring out books as you talk about them, and then I can hold them up and like, hey, we have a book. But that's about it.
It's 2 more minutes. We'll officially start in 2 more minutes.
Okay.
So while we're waiting for that 2 minute mark to start,
Mhm.
um, lots of new news coming out. So that My Singing Monsters board game is intriguing me.
That's just weird. I mean, it's okay. I don't mind it, but at the same time,
Mhm.
it feels like there. I don't know how you're gonna capture like what is kind of the core game experience, which is the
Mhm.
music.
Mhm.
Unless there's like it's an app assisted thing, but then is the app just my singing monsters? So I don't know.
Or it'd be nice if they could like, I don't know, if it were app assisted, then you remember that Singing Horses app. So like when you scan, everyone plays with the app on their phone. So when they unlock certain monsters, they scan it and it now plays in a loop that music.
Yeah, I was wondering if it'll be an AR type thing or you scan the monsters. But then again, they only look like they. It was just all the preview video only shows like four monsters.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. We haven't really seen anything. It's still the teaser announcement. And if anything, we are getting a glimpse of the tech tree of how, at least how
Yeah.
they approach the game, which should be interesting. And then what else was coming up? There was that other announcement. So there's the Avatar: The Last Airbender RPG coming out.
There's the new version of Galaxy Trucker.
There's that one too, which,
Dane is here. Hello, Dane.
hey Dane, I'm not sure if I'm excited for that new version. And
If it just means it helps more people get into it, then that's
yeah,
fine.
that's
We just talked about Galaxy Trucker.
that's how I feel about it too. All right, I guess that's it. It's 9:25 and we can start officially. This is Toby.
And this is Rocky.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy Pride, our little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
It is completely unscripted and not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us as we talk about everything and anything random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. It's our 183rd episode, and since it's Toby Week, as Rocky wants me to say,
I realize the light is like quite bright there. Look at that. Yes, I'm on fire.
I'm actually darker than you. See? Yeah. But since it is Toby Week, because my birthday is on Sunday,
Happy birthday.
today's topic
Toby.
is another topic which is close to my heart, and that is being scared beyond my guts. And, and our topic tonight is all about horror tabletop games, which will likely touch on board games, and we'll explain why, but will mostly touch on tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah, and as someone who has repeatedly stated on this show that I'm not into horror, Toby has finagled me into playing a lot of different horror RPGs
Mhm.
over and over again. And the stories are great, but then still like there's a lot of tense moments. So whatever. Okay. But first, board games. So well actually in general, I think we should like not quite definition, but in the same mode. Okay. What's our focus for horror games? Because there's a lot of games that seem to have horror elements
Yeah,
or
or horror
characters
themes.
or themes,
Mhm.
but then don't necessarily scare you or evoke a sense of horror.
And in the same way, there are movies that try to be horrific, but end up just being either disgusting or grotesque or
Super funny.
super funny or action packed.
Yes. Okay.
So I think what makes horror horror is basically the sensation or emotion of dread.
I was gonna hold up the book. This would perfect.
I
Like,
was
dread.
thinking of doing that. Stop reading my mind. And I was like telling myself I won't because that will spoil when I bring it out
I
later.
know, right? But the word is gonna be dread. It's a sense of dread.
There, we're doing it anyway. A sense of dread. And the thing about dread is it's not a surprise. It's not a shock moment.
It's tension.
It's that building tension of knowing, but just not knowing when it will finally happen. So
It's like me waiting for a jump scare whenever we're watching, and then the next.
and that's the funny thing. See, it's that dread that hits you more than the jump scare itself.
Yes.
Because you're anticipating, you're worried about it. It's the reason why movies like Jaws, despite it being shot from way back, are still much more scary than the Resident Evil series that Mila Jovovich was part of.
Which in itself is not horror.
Well,
It's more
eventually,
action.
eventually they embrace, let's just be action, let's throw in psychic powers, and let's just go crazy with it. But the first few installments did try to embrace horror, but just kept slipping. And likewise, when we talk about board games, dread is a very difficult thing to capture.
Because it's an
Um,
RPG. No, I mean,
well, for board games. Uh,
you didn't get the
I did.
joke.
And for most board games that are horror themed, the concept of dread is something they try to simulate instead as the concept of losing.
Yes.
So when we have stuff like the pandemic reskin, sorry, the Cthulhu reskin of the pandemic game,
Mm.
it's about losing, and that's where the fear comes from. Whereas if you compare it to, let's say, Nyctophobia, which is one of the recommended games we would talk about in Tabletop for horror games, it's about literally feeling your way in the dark because you have to play it with your eyes closed.
Yes. Or at least blindfolded.
And being
or
afraid
something.
of everything you touch because you're
Yes.
not sure what it is. Or in a similar
That's a scary
example,
game.
we have Alien from Legendary Encounters,
Oh, that gets a little close.
wherein something as simple as drawing a card, you're scared it might have a face hugger that leaps out.
Yes.
So there's that, wait, I don't want to open it. And, okay. And it's those moments, it's those type of board games that succeed in such moments. What other board games had supposedly horror elements but didn't really had worked out? So there's Last Night on Earth, which is a zombie game
It's a
we
zombie
really
game.
love,
Yes.
but it doesn't really invoke dread.
And it doesn't try to because
Mm-hmm.
it tries to capture sort of the B movie
Campy,
horror
yes.
genre. That's why if you look at the wonderful photography art for all the cards,
Mhm.
it's super campy. I love it. I love Last Night on Earth because of that.
Mhm.
Same thing with Zombicide. Zombicide is mechanical to a fault. We don't own a
Yes.
copy of the Zombicide games because it just feels weird because
Mhm.
it's just like because it's the player turn and then you roll automatically the zombie turn and you have no chance to respond
Mhm.
to the zombie turn. So it's just like
And then a game that interestingly captured both action and dread was the Jaws board game.
oh, okay, yes, to be fair.
There are those moments of utter fear, surprisingly for the shark, not wanting to be caught.
me, don't find me.
But then it flips around to the players getting more and more afraid as the shark comes up every now and then in the second phase of the game
Mm.
and attacking them. And there's that, oh my god, I'm in the water, get up, get up. So that was one of the few games that also
That does
captured
pretty
it.
well. Yeah.
Beyond that,
Because like we have some games that try to look scary, like
Mhm.
Don't Turn Your Back,
yeah,
which is based on
it's a
an
deck
RPG.
builder and
And it's like some interesting art choices, but then the game in itself is not scary.
Mhm.
It's just a deck building game.
And then likewise, you have games who might touch on themes that would be terrifying in the real world. For example, Grizzle, being in the war, being in the front lines.
That's just depressing.
But it's just heavy. It's not, and not to say it's not a great game. It's
yeah,
one of,
yeah,
it's one
but
of
it's not
our,
a horror game.
It's one of our favorites, but it's one of the favorites we rarely play because it's heavy.
It's so heavy.
So given that challenge when it comes to board games, oh, one last thing to add. There is what was it called? The Mask of the Red Death,
Oh,
which is beautifully evocative.
but it looks very Tim Burton.
It's very Tim Burton,
But because it looks very Tim Burton already, that softens the
and
impact.
and even the gameplay itself doesn't have much elements that feel scary.
Yeah, it's a party and like
There's
you're guessing
dying
everybody
and
and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Some might even say Werewolf is not a nice horror game, but
Not
we don't quite
really.
see it. But then again,
Like,
maybe
it also depends on the group you're playing with.
Yes.
Maybe there are more serious werewolf players that
Mhm.
like really set mood and tone. Because even things like, to be fair, things like Escape Tales: The Awakening that had a disturbing story. I don't think it was quite horror,
Mhm.
but it was definitely there was a fair amount of suspense and um, mystery to it, but not full on like horror.
Hmm.
So, but just again, not bad, not bad.
So, given that, and we didn't include a lot of other horror games that are out there because we either they never crossed our radar or we never bothered to get them.
Which is pretty much most of the Cthulhu related
Yeah.
things.
So you have everything from Cthulhu Can Die to etc. etc. But they just didn't seem to appeal to us. They didn't seem to
Mansion of Madness.
have that interesting level.
Yeah.
Um, it then it then feels better to shift gears and focus on tabletop role playing games. And when it comes to tabletop role playing games, we shall cover this in no particular order
Yeah, we'll just
because
see
we
what
did
Toby pulls out of the stack.
because we didn't have time to really arrange things in a particular order. And at the same time, I will admit, it's hard for me to judge because every game has their own reason why I love it.
Oh yeah. But hey, it's your week, it's your episode, so yay!
So I will start with what we've been saying the whole time: Dread.
Dread,
So Dread,
Dread.
Dread is an amazing game, which does not, which for some people does not even qualify as a tabletop role playing game.
Which is sad.
And the main reason for that is there are some people who feel that games that are story games are different from games that are role playing games. And supposedly the distinction is a story game doesn't care about the character, it cares about what
The
you
plot.
want the story to be about.
I don't know.
Whereas a RPG, it's all about the character. So it's all about their stats, their advancement, and this and that. So when you have a story game, characters can die and the players lament the loss, but it's all part of the narrative. But when you have a role-playing game, when you lose your character, you just create a new one because it's now time to see how far you can go with this next one. And that supposedly is the perspective some have. Don't agree with that
I
perspective.
don't agree because then it still it mostly defines the RPGs as a whole around the sort of tactical D&D model
Yes.
where it's like it's advancement, it's character progression through advancement, and then seeing how far the character goes, and then rolling a new one.
But
if you
for
need to.
some who are purists in their perspective, that's what role-playing games are about. Which is why some even go as far as saying a lot of modern Dungeons and Dragons systems are now more story game influenced compared to OSR. We won't get into that debate. We don't agree with a lot of those points, so we'll focus instead on what we love. And Dread is one of the games I really love. You've only tried this.
No,
You haven't.
no, I haven't. I was running a different game.
Yeah, I
That-
was running and you were running something else. You're
Yeah.
right. Dread is unique in the sense that it uses Jenga blocks, or basically a stack of blocks, as the system you use when you narrate the story.
It's the conflict resolution thing.
You
It's the
play-
chance thing.
You play different characters, which hit archetypes. So if you're playing a typical Dread story and it's, let's say,
Let's see your
um,
classic horror movie.
classic horror tropes, then maybe you have the football player,
The cheerleader.
you have the cheerleader, you have the nerdy guy, you have the cop who no one listens to,
Hmm.
you have the parent who is so tired of her marriage and is in love with the cop, and it's all these tropes. When you play the story of Dread, whenever you are faced with a challenge that you have to overcome, and the risk is deadly or the risk is dangerous, like going to the basement to check why the power went out,
Uh-oh.
or telling your friends you'll be right back because you sneak off to the back of the house to make out with your boyfriend. Then you draw blocks equal to basically a number from 1 to 3, depending on how easy it would have normally been for your character. So if you were the cheerleader and you're meeting up with your boyfriend, 1 block is fine. But if you're the geeky nerd, and as far as the tropes of the story go, I'm meeting with my boyfriend, then maybe you need to draw 3 for people to really believe you that it's happening. The moment you place the blocks, so you draw one, and then you draw one from the body of the tower with only one hand, and you place them on top. The moment you successfully place it on top, the story continues. But as the story continues, the tower gets less and less
Yeah.
stable.
So question, and because I haven't really like played,
Mhm.
but then like, so do you have to follow official Jenga rules? Like, you have to, you can't get from the first
Yes.
row. So it really is Jenga on the
It
side.
basically really uses Jenga rules. And then if ever the tower falls, your character dies.
Yes.
And that represents in the horror movie or the horror genre how someone dies and the tension drops.
Yeah.
And suddenly, despite the scene being horrific, we all know everyone's going to run out and escape. And it
Mhm.
won't be until much later till the next person dies. So it's that buildup of tension and the crash down which makes this game amazing. And one of the other rules which I really love about this is that the player can just choose to push the tower.
Yes, and like die.
So it's like, you know,
It's sacrifice.
the killer's coming. You're the geek. You have to lock the door because everyone's running off. But then you realize, wait, this is the moment I show that I care for him. I push the tower and I yell, "Run!" And as the geek, maybe I grab the wires and I short circuit the door so the killer gets stunned for a few seconds or something. But that's how Dread plays, and it's just amazing. So that's Dread. Do you want to touch on
I
another
don't
one?
know. It's okay. I don't gonna keep stacking the books here. It's not going to work out. And hey, if you're watching, do let us know. Leave a comment, an emoji, something.
You can talk about this.
Oh my gosh. Okay, then we will talk about this.
The next one is
Orpheus.
Orpheus is a game which we cannot mention without its partner. Now let me get the partner book. And that is
The less interesting cover.
it has all the inserts.
Yeah. It's a black cover.
Wait, and the light is not helping make it visible. Oh no,
It doesn't really have much of a.
it's barely.
Just,
It's
yeah,
more
yeah.
than the spine. But it's Wraith, the Oblivion, and Orpheus, both of which are horror games
Mitch.
by the World of Darkness, in the World of Darkness setting, White Wolf Games. Wraith has you playing people who have died and have not moved on. And whatever unfinished business you have, it is part now of your journey because death does not mean the end.
Orpheus has you playing members of the secret organization known as Orpheus, where you all seem to be able to manifest ghostly abilities.
Mhm.
And their main categories, which is like sleepers and oh my god, what's the other one?
You have the projector. You're all
Projector.
projectors.
You're all projectors, but then
There's
some sleep,
sleepers,
and then some what's the other-
skim.
skimmers.
Yes.
Yes. So one have to be gradually put into a near death like state, which is
Mhm.
very flatliners in a cradle, which is a very complicated whatever bed.
Mhm.
And then the skimmers are people who can at will sort of astral project out
Yes.
into their ghostly form. But then each has their pros and cons in terms of how things are handled.
So as far as chronology are concerned, Wraith came out much earlier than Orpheus, and Wraith came out as one of the early games of the World of Darkness line of White Wolf. Um, it was a heavy dark game, and it did not pull punches.
Yes.
In the game, a main premise is that when you die, you then are separated from this dark side of yourself, which is known as the shadow. And that's because the shadow actually understands you should die and you should move on and you should be destroyed. You're dead, it's over. And your psyche, as they call it, or the Wraith character, you're still refusing this. You're still holding on to these things called fetters, which are either great regrets or objects that are associated with you.
Yeah, just strong ties to life.
You were a writer, then maybe the computer you always type in is a fetter. You were married, then maybe the wedding ring is the fetter.
Or your wife
Or
could
your-
be your fetter.
Or your wife, the wife himself, the wife herself will be the fetter. But the point of Wraith is you haven't moved on, and as part of the horror, you discover that this place, this limbo state you're in, is not empty. The place known as the Shadowlands, because it's like in the shadows between the world, actually has its own hierarchy, and this hierarchy has found a way to use you as part of its economy. So it's a very, very dark story. If you want to play it light, then you actually end up having Beetlejuice.
You could.
because it has the hierarchy system.
Yeah. It has the bureaucracy.
And it has the monster type of ghosts that are after you because they don't want you being more human. It has you struggling to connect with the living. But then if you want it to be less comedy, more deep, more heavy, then you have stuff like The Haunting of Bly Manor and the like we're in. It's all about realizing the horror that you haven't really moved on, but then realizing the opportunity that you have to make a difference or to reach out to people who might, need your help despite you being dead. Orpheus, on the other hand,
Orpheus starts out feeling like you're kind of cool because like, ooh, I have these abilities. Ooh, we're solving problems. And then like you can start with like really basic cases like, oh, let's find out the password from the dead guy
because he
that's
passed
needed.
away and no one can open the safe.
Yeah, so it's like ooh, Mystery Inc. sort of things. But then of course things start to get creepier because you will encounter shades who are ghosts who are really stuck on Earth and really twisted and it's a Ghostbuster situation already. You using your near ghostly powers.
Orpheus is amazing in the sense that it actually hits so many possible audience bases with one game.
Yes.
For people new to the genre,
you can play it like a superhero spy game.
and it's a standalone system. It's
Yes.
a standalone game. You don't need to know anything about the other books. For people who love Wraith, oh my gosh, this offers such a different perspective to what's going on, to why or how people would have reacted to how the things exist.
Yeah, because essentially you're hunting down wraiths. You're hunting down ghosts that haven't moved
And
on.
you're helping them move on, whether they like it or not.
Yes, hence Ghostbusters.
And then the last thing about Orpheus, which is amazing, is that it came out with a main book, and then it's followed by 5 other source books, which make it like one singular campaign, an amazing, evolving story that just touches on so many levels of the horror of death, dying, and not really being dead in one narrative.
I'm glad that we were able to play through pretty much the
Mhm.
entire campaign, and it was terrifying. And then in our more recent Wraith game, we were already able to reach a point that Toby pulled in Orpheus, at least the beginnings
it.
of
To
Orpheus.
see it in another perspective.
So we're Wraith seeing Orpheus happen and like, oh my god, what's happening? So
why do these people not realize what they're touching and playing with?
yeah, so uh, the relationship between the two systems is fascinating. The way that the stories play together is amazing. But yeah, you can play one or the other. But it does require a certain mindset. Because like even like with Orpheus, we started out very like freak of the week.
Yes.
Like today this is our case.
Yes.
We're gonna investigate. This is our case. We investigate. But then as you get through the books, oh my god,
The meta plot.
the meta plot gets really big
And it's nice how it really makes you feel like you're the only ones who can deal with it. Because you're
Yes.
the only ones going through all this and knowing what's
Yes.
happening.
and are able to literally like see ghosts because that's like a
So Mitch mentions blank cover. Yes, this is the 20th anniversary edition of the Wraith book, which is why it's so beautiful. It's silver lined. And the reason why it's so thick, Wraith had many books in its 20 years, well, less than 20 years of publication. It kind of died earlier
yeah.
than that.
It's
but-
the 20th anniversary, but it wasn't 20 years of active.
So they
like
kind of
releases.
tried to compile all those books into one singular book, and that's why it's huge.
Actually, a lot of World of Darkness decided to do 20th edition
Yes.
things, and it's kind of awesome.
Sam mentions World of Darkness is always great for thematic settings.
Yes.
So true. I still want to play 10 Candles, but I don't know if it can be done online. We shall talk about that more, but not tonight.
Oh,
Because
Mitch is asking me to
we've
open the book.
never actually touched on, we've never really touched on 10 Candles yet. But this is one of the artwork for Wraith. This is actually the most colorful it has ever gotten.
I know, it's like,
If you look
Ash
at-
looks a little happy.
If you look at the older artwork, which they still have some here, there. So the older artwork is more like that. It's a lot of
Black
blacks
and white,
whites.
at most sepia.
Yeah. And a lot of intense visual imagery.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, this was definitely had to get it. And Wraith was infamous because, as mentioned, there is the shadow, the dark side, that wants to convince you to let go and to destroy yourself.
Yes.
The official rules for that, well, the printed rules for that, which was offered as an optional rule if you wanted to use it or not, was that you have one of the other players play your shadow,
Yes.
and you would craft masks. So whenever it was the shadow playing, you would then wear the mask, and the other players can tell if you're being yourself or playing the shadow. It was a difficult thing to play, and it is definitely something recommended only for groups that really know each other and are really close.
That you really trust each other.
But it had such an amazing effect when we played it before, and we added the personal touch of, so we made masks using our own faces.
Yeah, this is the
Using paper
infamous
mache.
story. Okay.
So like imagine if I made the mask using my own face, but then if you're my shadow, you use that mask.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I see my own face.
Because
talking
the
to me.
shadows are essentially like reflections of you.
Yes.
These things.
So let's move on to the next game, and we are still sticking to the World of Darkness. Um, I'm pulling out this edition. This is Vampire the Masquerade. This is the revised edition, if I remember correctly. We have the 5th edition rulebook there as well, but I'm choosing to pick this one up.
Okay.
Only because it was in this edition I touched on with a lot more horror. And the horror was not from Vampire itself. Vampire, however, cannot be ignored for being one of the first games in the industry to really stop and go, what if we let the players play the monsters?
Yes.
So Mark Rein-Hagen and his group, now I'm having them name blackouts. Justin DeChili, Stewart, and Stephen White. Oh my God, I'm just remembering the names. But they basically crafted a game that allowed people to play monsters, and they were all inspired by the depressing look of Gary, Indiana at that time. So Vampire the Masquerade gets a nod here because it brought us this set of 3 books, the Giovanni Saga. I guess you could say
Toby's favorite thing ever.
it is judged by many to be extremely railroady, which I do not blame them for, because given its time, it was a railroady.
But compared to the main book, it was so different.
Yes,
It could, because of the fact that it had this very strong plot that it was trying to insert the players into. Whereas the base Vampire game, it describes the politics and the setting,
and leaves you
to figure out the story.
The Giovanni Saga is composed of 4 books officially, but in this, I kind of got the collection for the first one, this 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 separate books. They explore the story of a group of young vampires who, unfortunately, are invited. Well, a group of people who are unfortunately invited.
We were vampires when we started.
To a dinner, only to learn that they are there to become vampire meals for something known as the Conspiracy of Isaac. And this unfolds into a much greater saga that spans across the years all the way to the modern age. It starts out in 1444. No, earlier. It starts out around 1444, but it ends in the modern nights. And it has your players go through many of the key vampire events in history, as well as bear witness to one of the greatest acts of atrocities that the clan Giovanni accomplished, which was to turn themselves into a clan. That they accomplished, of course, through the act of diablerie against a certain elder. But this was filled with moments of terror, moments of dread. It utilized helplessness so much because it needed to push that feeling that this is how horrible vampires can be.
Yeah, this is definitely like, if you were to explore the Giovanni Saga in modern gaming parlance, there's going to be a lot of trigger warnings, a lot of safety tools need to be brought out.
Yes.
But because if once consent is clear, it's an amazing story. There are very disturbing moments, but it's a great story. Mitch is asking, do you record your gameplays like the count for board games? If yes, what are the stats? Not really, because was this role playing games will last as long as they will last.
Yeah.
So and then there's no winning. I mean, indirectly, because when I take notes, I like to count the sessions. So like we'll tag what session number it is.
Mhm.
Like this week, our ongoing Vampire Fifth Edition game is approaching 50 sessions total
Yes. Yes.
over the course of almost 2 years. So that's kind of crazy.
And then before we had the 7C game that lasted, I think, around 3 real years, if I
Mm.
remember correctly.
So it really depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't have a super app system. I just take notes.
What,
Sam's like, oh gosh, not Diablerie. Oh my, it's Giovanni. So much Diablerie.
yes. What else about Vampire? Fifth edition is amazing. It nicely captures the sense of personal horror with the new hunger rules, because now you always feel like the beast might come out and
Yeah, at first I was
ruin
weirded out
things.
by this hunger dice. What are hunger dice? What are we doing? But by doing it that way, it took away the sort of gamery mindset of this is my blood pool. I have X points of blood to use in the game, and then as I use my abilities, I burn blood. Then I run out.
The gas tank feeling.
Yeah, you have vampires with like very limited fuel, and then it runs out. So the fifth edition introduces a new set of rules, which is the hunger dice. So it is different colored dice that you roll as part of your dice pool.
Mhm.
So if your total pool is 6 and your hunger is 1, you'll roll 5 normal dice and 1 hunger die. And then there are just special things that happen depending on the hunger result versus the main result.
So, admittedly, beautiful collection. Extremely, extremely beautifully done. The artwork is, um, it's a nice shift from the classic, because the classic was Timothy Bradstreet,
Mhm.
who did all these very realistic portrayals of characters. This one uh, has hit and miss moments. So it uses photography for a lot of the visuals because it wanted to give a real world feel to it. But it also uses a lot of more um,
Evocative
yeah,
illustrations.
evocative illustrations. So some find it weird because it feels more like a fashion magazine. Others, however, love the fact that it feels like a fashion magazine because there is admittedly, I mean, look at that.
It's very the cell.
Yeah.
And roses everywhere because it's vampire.
Mhm.
Then I guess but we also have to cite the fact that in the whole like that the fact that there's Wraith 20th is that there is a vampire 20th edition, which is like a celebration of the older
Yes.
system because there's a weird pivot amongst the World of Darkness games where there's the new or there was the new World of Darkness and the classic or
Mhm.
old World of Darkness, and they just tweak a lot of the systems.
For those who are not quite aware, Vampire the Masquerade officially died, meaning they closed the game line, when they released the saga of books that covered the event known as Gehenna, which is when the ancients rise and Cain supposedly shuts down the whole vampire thing. But then the game line remained so popular that people still clamored for more. As the years passed, eventually the World of Darkness rebooted. A new line was released, and this eventually became Vampire the Requiem, which had 5 clans instead of the 7/13/15/30 numbers that were in the Masquerade line. And while that system itself was popular enough to warrant a second edition, and now continues to still have material coming out for its many other lines, there was no denying that the love for Masquerade was still there.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were working on the 20th edition release, eventually there was a group that wanted to push for a new edition. So it was that odd moment of, hey, there's a 20th edition, but there's a fifth. So which one is it? And if you think about it, it's like separate timelines. Because while they all follow the same meta plot, you still
Yeah.
have Beckett and both trying to understand the Book of Nod. You still have Sasha Vikos, the Angel of Cain. They take very different directions, but they are close enough that you can dive into the fifth edition and still celebrate your love for the earlier ones without having too much problems.
I guess it's funny because the older lines all kind of hyped up the coming of the millennium, which is a great event to tie to. And then
When you pass the millennium,
it's we have no more story, and that was like I think the nicest thing about that was B20, right? That tried to address the what happens after the millennium. uh, it's a lot of good things.
now, still, yeah.
Sam said it's Interhub Requiem and Masquerade are different publishers.
Yes, because that is the power of licensing. And officially, White Wolf Games, if I remember correctly, has no longer exists. It's now the
Yeah.
Onyx Path, and you have the other publishers that are now still licensing.
So White Wolf
the
is
IP.
like a license. It's an IP that's
Yes.
floating around and getting used by different people. Hence V20 and Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition existing together.
Now we're still in the world of darkness because I need to then pull this game, which has not received as much love as I wished it did. But considering its subject matter, it's hard.
I know what it is. Yes, it is.
Demon the Fallen.
So with this, the White Wolf line explored a lot of the quote unquote monsters. For
Mhm.
example, there was one for mummies. There was one for werewolves. There was one for
Great.
wraiths, okay, like we talked about, and then fairy creatures. But then it was like a little
Then
darker.
there's mages, there's immortals, there's the hunters.
There's the Frankensteiny Prometheans,
Mhm.
and then we get this demon.
So Demon the Fallen came out in the earlier years. There was a later demon game, Demon the
Demon the-
Descent,
At the set, yeah.
which was then for the newer edition lines. But Demon the Fallen basically has you literally play demons. And because this meant having to identify faith, Demon the Fallen was able to approach the topic by sort of grabbing a lot of the faith to show that they were all true but all wrong at the same time. So there is a God, there are the angels, there are people who are like saints, but then it's not necessarily the Christian Catholic God we know, despite having certain connections to it. Many of the demons are inspired by other religions or other demonic or esoteric lore. And you playing the demon, you basically play one of the fallen angels. You play one of the angels who has not chosen to go back, and you have your reasons. For some, it's because they fell in love with a mortal. For others, it's because they like being down here. And for others, they realize that there's a lot of lies going on with what the host was talking about. And this in itself is such a wide world to explore. Demon actually eventually introduces things that are worse than demons. In lack of, well, not to spoil it too much, but because they are the earthbound, they are the ones who have literally made themselves part of the world. And then it includes as well a very interesting system on how pacts are done. So you know how in the stories there's always that, serve me and I shall make you successful and this and that.
The deal.
That system exists in this game. So as a player character, you can, for example, talk to an NPC and promise the NPC that they will become president. And there is a system that will allow them to most likely become president because your powers will allow it to happen so long as the deal is maintained. So it's a very interesting game. It has very nice nods into looking at things in that perspective. And I will admit that a large part of the reason we loved this was because we were fans of that certain movie called The Prophecy and another movie that had Nicolas Cage in it.
Would this involve bees?
No. But Demon the Fallen was an amazing, amazing world. We didn't add the other World of Darkness lines, Werewolf, Kindred of the East, etc. Only because one, we never really explored them for horror stories, or two, we haven't really played them that much.
True.
But I will be. It will be wrong for me to leave the world of darkness without talking about this set of books. So these are various books, and they're what I think they're what make the different lines so great because they're all written in character for the different game lines. So you have the Days of Fire, which basically is like the journal on the things to come, possibly written by Lucifer. You have the Chronicles of the Black Labyrinth, which is your in-character journal, supposedly, of the practices of the enemy in Werewolf the Apocalypse, which is basically the people who worship the worm. You
Okay.
have the Ursi's Fragments, which is a vampire-based in-character book chronicling the Cappadocians
Oh.
and what they thought and what they felt before they are completely destroyed by the Giovanni. My least favorite, the Hunter Apocrypha. Least favorite only because I'm not a fan of the game line, but I still love the book because it nicely has end of the world ideas and the like for your Hunter
The
games.
Demon Hunter one.
This is Hunter. No, it was the Hunter you played that was already Hunter the Vigil. That was the New World of Darkness.
This is the
old-
Fallen.
Yeah. We of course has the book. They have the Book of Nod, which is your classic. This is all the stories about Cain and about the coming Gehenna and all that. But of course, she won't allow him to be the only one with the book. We have Revelations of the Dark Mother, which is all the Lilith-inspired lore. So it's stuff about how she actually may have been the first vampire, not Cain. A lot of these books are in character, even if you don't,
They're fiction
Yeah.
essentially.
and even if you don't play the games, they're still worth keeping. They're still fun to read. There was a time White Wolf released their 666 bargain bin thing. The devil made me do it. This was when the line ended, and they
Mm.
needed to offload their stock, so they kind of released it for that. So that was how I was able to get a lot of these things. But man, these are so fun to read. They're amazingly well done. What I wish I had, which I did for a while, but then lost, and now totally told myself not to try to get it back again, was something called the Vampire Diary.
Okay.
Um,
With no relation to the TV show.
think Griffin and Sabine style
Okay.
of a woman who eventually gets embraced.
Oh my god. And it's like all through letters.
It's letters, postcards, and but it was a White Wolf release from way back, and it was super expensive. So I felt very bad when I lost it, and I don't have the heart to risk losing it again. So that concludes our World of Darkness selection.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot. I mean, to be fair, you can probably play any World of Darkness game with a certain degree of horror
Yes.
in its styling, with the right mood and consent and agreement and participation of the players. But yeah, I think these are the systems that, because also the way the backstory is crafted and
Mhm.
such, it really builds these. It really supports that narrative and builds that, because a lot of it, the very nature of the character, especially when you get to things like Wraith, there is an inherent tragedy
Yes.
in the structure. Even
Going
with Vampire.
going through comments real quick. Sam shares Changeling is near and dear to my heart. It's our favorite.
To be fair, Changeling the Lost is quite dark.
Yes.
It's quite dark.
We
Exactly.
didn't include it here, however, because we never approach Changeling games as horror games.
Yeah, because
We-
changelings are still in their chorus of core.
It's hope.
They are hopeful
Yes.
creatures.
And we have that distinction of when we do play horror games, we understand many stories are hopeless. It's all about give it up. It's not going to work.
Yes.
But our Changeling games are always don't give up. You will find a way. You will beat this. And it might be tragic sometimes. It might be a Dantean who learns to love, but then realizes in his heart he's still a Dantean. But there's hope.
Mitch asks, game for newbies? Probably. I mean, to some degree, there's a way to run it, but then I wouldn't want this to be your first foray.
Yeah.
into
Well, game for newbies. In terms of this one, any except Demon and Wraith.
that's fair.
Vampire.
Orpheus
pwede pa.
is kaya pa.
Orpheus kaya pa. Kasi vampire, you can start human, or you can just jump in as undead people with superpowers, and that still works. Going through the other questions.
And like keep the politics light.
Yes.
Yeah.
Eric mentions, I'd love to try Demon. I would love to run it again, but we'll see when. Sam mentioned, sounds very Sandman Lucifer. Yes, that's what I love about Demon. It had that humanizing aspect to it. And that's part of the thing about the game. You aren't necessarily just purely the demon in the world. You have a human host, and that has its own repercussions because they know you're in there. And then Mitch asks why the least in terms of Hunter. Um, Admittedly, when it comes to Hunter, I like the new Hunter more, Hunter the Vigil, because there was so much more color and personality in the different types of factions. Whether you were the, what was yours? I forgot what it was called.
I don't know. It wasn't revealed to me yet.
Lucifuge, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Wherein you were the seventh son of the seventh, whatever. But then you have the other hunters, which are the ones that stole artifacts, the ones that are junkies of vampire blood. In the old World of Darkness hunter, it was very exalted. They were like chosen by some divine being to hunt down the evil things.
And it didn't. So I'm asking, but so it didn't have like as good a relationship like between like hunter and demon, the same way that Wraith and Orpheus have a relationship.
There was implied. There was an implication that the messengers that were empowering hunters may have been the host.
Okay.
But then there is also a book that sort of tosses the possibility it's the Earthbound pretending to be the host.
Oh, even more deep.
Which is interesting. But it's interesting on a demon level, not on a hunter level.
That's sad.
Because in a hunter level, if that's the truth, then our whole line is pointless. We're not really good. We're not really hunters. So it kind of throws it all away. It's like if you had a game of vampire and the big reveal is you're not really vampires.
or your human fighting vampires and Van Helsing is like that. Oh, special mention to the fact that there is still the core World of Darkness book. That's not vampires. That's not ghosts and whatnot.
Officially, that is now the Chronicles of Darkness book because that's the new World of Darkness line. The original White Wolf, the classic World of Darkness, or the old World of Darkness, as some call it, only had mortal rules as an optional rule.
Yeah.
It never really focused on mortals at the start. Whereas Chronicles of Darkness did try to, let's release first and let everyone start as human, and then let's start releasing these lines that you can then progress your story and you turn into something else.
Which made for interesting opportunities for a vampire and a werewolf to work together with the Promethean. Things like that. I mean, like you could mix the lines and like have a diverse party, so to speak. It's just that instead of a character class per thing, it's a book and system supporting each one, and then trying to reconcile the rules. It's a lot of work for the GM.
Now, for people who are familiar with the Powered by the Apocalypse line and might be interested in the World of Darkness, there is Urban Shadows as an option to try. And it's well written. It covers almost all the World of Darkness lines in its own way. But my preference is this other lesser known book known as Undying. It borrows from the Powered by the Apocalypse system. It actually has the logo there in the back. It's not readable. But it's a completely diceless approach to a vampire game. You have your tokens that represent your blood pool. You have different vampire types, everything from, I forgot the terms, the beast to the this and that. The puppet master, we can't find them right now. But it's a nice way to have a quick vampire game without having to read all the lore. And with having specific moves that are specific to the type of character you're playing. So for example, you might have moves. So like if you were the wolf, you might have a move called the pack, which basically allows you to use the fact you can pull animals to your aid or other predators to help you. So it's an interesting thing to consider, Undying.
But diceless.
But diceless, which is a tricky thing to think about. But it then is about bidding. So if I have 5 blood and you have 5 blood, and let's say we're fighting for domain of the port area, so we now quietly bid.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then I win, but now I'm lesser in power because I'm more preoccupied with that. The tree, which makes you aware, I can now be outmaneuvered with other things. So it's a very interesting system. And then it also has a mechanic for the prestation concept, wherein since I did this for you, you now owe me. So it has that system there. So it's an interesting system. Moving on, I shall go to this one because you've been able to play
At
this.
least, yeah.
And it's beautiful. It's admittedly
Beautiful but disturbing.
It's not visible there.
Bluebeard's Bride.
Bluebeard's Bride is a horror game that has 3 to 5 people playing a story that draws inspiration from the Bluebeard fairy tale. And what makes this interesting is that you are not playing different characters.
Yeah, you're playing the same person, but different aspects, or yeah, I've got aspects of that person.
So it's a beautifully done, immaculately designed, and wonderfully written book, wherein you are the new bride of Bluebeard. You've been left behind with one rule, and that is to never step into a certain room. You're given a ring of keys, and you freely explore the house as you explore and find out more about this marriage you're in. Players play the different aspects of the wife of the bride. You can be the crone who feels like you know that men can't be trusted, and that people are up to stuff. You could be the mother, and you're super protective and all this and that. I'm trying to find the other names. The sisters. You can be the witch, and you have powers which they have not yet seen. You can be the virgin or the fatale. And all these different personalities give you the access to specific moves. Because again, it's in very much in line with something powered by the apocalypse, wherein if you want to use a power, then you do it. And by making it part of the fiction, then you can therefore invoke the power. So like one of the rules I loved here is when you shiver in fear, you use this power, which basically meant during the game, if you find yourself, oh my God, it's a perfect time to activate that power because you're reflecting that moment.
So the game is technically powered by the apocalypse, but it's very thematic evocative. It's one of the few books I've seen that has a rating adults only label on the back as a reminder of very mature content and themes. Not just because it's sexual, but because it's heavy. It's quite heavy. It becomes an exploration of essentially the diminished role and sometimes exploitation of women, especially in the context of a marriage. So that's heavy stuff. It's very, very heavy stuff. You need to have a very long conversation with your group before deciding to play it.
Yes.
And then you need to digest it after. We've only played this as a one-shot so far. And it was already super intense.
And part of the system has you having this object, which you use as the ring.
Yeah.
So whoever is in control that moment holds it and pretty much controls the scenes. But then others might go, you're scared, I'll take the ring. And there's that twist of power and a struggle of wills. So it's an interesting game. It's very evocative. I wish this could be played more often because it just really touches on a lot of emotional pathos moments. But it's definitely not something you can just jump into.
Yeah.
I don't even think this is a safe game to explore in a convention unless you are with people.
Unless you're strictly playing with people, I mean, it's definitely one of those games where trust is very important because of the places that the story may go.
So you have little guides there and pages.
Yeah, and then like the main mechanic is ultimately is like what room do you explore?
Yes.
It's like in the initial turns, it's everybody explores a room, and then the main storyteller will describe what the room is, and then it'll be some sort of encounter memory thing, whatever, and then it's just like that. Name a room that you think you want to explore.
And there's all these little there's decks of cards that help you come up with the rooms. There's tables that you could use to come up with ideas, and in the end, you shape such a powerful story with this game. All right. I shall jump back to the past
Dun, dun,
to a very old
dun.
game system, which actually had a revival,
Yes, as powered by the apocalypse also.
and that is Cult.
Cult.
For anyone who's a fan of Silent Hill, for anyone who loves the deeply disturbing movies such as I think it was Session 9 and
I don't know.
um,
I don't touch these
Jacob's
things.
Ladder,
Oh,
then
that sounds
Cult is the game for you. If you're not so much into horror but you're still curious what Cult is like, then think of Dark City, but then mix it with Hellraiser, and you get Cult.
both of which I think are movies that are no longer easy to reference
Yes.
for younger audiences.
So in Cult, you play people who have realized and discovered that you are actually in a prison. The prison is the illusion. Everything you see around you is not real. And that's because celestial, or no, not celestial, not necessarily infernal either, but overwhelmingly inhuman beings are now in charge of you and are keeping you trapped in the illusion for their own reasons. And you eventually find like minded people who have always thought themselves to be insane for most of their lives. And you now have to survive in this reality. So, Cult is an extremely heavy contemporary horror game wherein um, it approaches the world as a what if spiritual beings were real and none of them were good.
Yeah.
So it's a different take on what cosmic horror Cthulhu games try to do,
Mm.
but it gave it a much more visceral and I guess you could say on the nose approach.
It's hard to play. We tried to start a
Hey,
campaign.
your character sheet's still here.
It's still in the book. Oh my god. And but we only really got through like a few sessions.
The character sheet you have here is the other edition.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so if you do explore Cult, be warned. The old edition is tremendously classic RPG style.
Super boring character.
super
sheet.
boring character sheet. Lots of numbers, lots of things to fill up. There, look at that. Look at that.
Yeah, it was surprisingly crunchy.
Yeah. But then, if you are curious about this world, you're tempted to explore more horror in this vein, then they did release Cult Divinity Lost, which is a powered by the Apocalypse version of this game, where you play different people who have discovered the illusion exists.
That was
one-
easier.
Yeah, that was much easier to play, but it wasn't as heavy.
Yeah, I think it lost some of the power of the mood and setting
because
of this original.
because the original Cult system felt punishing.
Oppressive.
The system felt very hard to survive in,
Yes.
and Cult Divinity Lost felt a bit more superheroic.
Yeah,
You know
and I don't know if that really worked with the setting. And to be fair, like me personally, I do like games where I feel like I have power and progression to some degree. And that's why I also probably contributed to how difficult it was to play Cult when we tried to do it. And I think, and then and then the whole group had a hard time. The whole group had a hard time at that. And these weren't new players.
Yeah, but this isn't hard time, meaning the game was
It's not
emotionally
inherent-
difficult.
Yeah,
It was a
it's-
hard time in the sense that it felt really hard to not want to just give up.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
It was that pervasive feeling of um, maybe there's no point in really fighting.
Mm.
And this is despite having clear possible ways to keep going because the whole world itself was really heavy. We will then shift to two games which we will show on screen because we only have this in digital.
Okay, wait. I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna cancel this.
Okay, it's not ready. So
No, my work download.
Okay.
It just keeps dying.
going through the comments real quick. Mitch mentions my special power, not special pala. Okay. Sam mentions Monster Heartstrings. Yes, they're similar to Monster Heartstrings the way Demon did
Which
the
is
connections and
yeah,
stuff.
it's like that's a apocalypse all over the
And then
place.
Sam also mentions, watching the book pile get higher gives me so much joy. We're happy that we're giving you joy despite a horror-inspired episode. This is, I dare say, this is in my top 3.
It is one of the scariest games we
Yeah,
have played.
and this is in my top 3 if I were to choose scary games. It's not in my top 3 if I were to choose RPGs I love the
Yeah,
most.
yeah, yeah.
But in terms of horror, John Wick's, you can pronounce this better now because you've been practicing
Shower
German.
Merchant.
John Wick's Shower Merchant is a horror game where you play children
Shower Merchant.
and you wake up in a different place. A place where things are worn down, the beds are missing their mattresses. The place is filled with peeling wallpaper, bare wooden floors, cold, cold, cold. And worse, you see other kids. And they're all terrified.
And that's the number one thing we have to stress
And
is
they're
that
all running.
you are playing children,
Mhm.
and that is difficult.
And as children, you find yourself in this place, this small town, where a grinning man dragging around a meat hook seems to be stalking you and hunting you down. I can't say more beyond that as far as the setting is concerned, but it has always been quite a delight to play this game. We've played this a number of times. We've interconnected some of the stories. We've explored the many locations in the game and tried to see how far people can get. And it remains a still powerful, evocative game. It has one of the simplest systems ever.
Yes.
You have 2 stats, which is hope and fear, and they have a number rating, and then you roll, excuse me, I'm burping. Excuse me. And then you roll dice, and the dice you roll depends on whether you're acting based on hope or based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
Guy with a meat hook chasing after you in the room, you're rushing up the steps. So how do you escape? Do you pull the other kids with you as you rush up the steps? Then
Hope.
maybe it's a hope roll. Or do you shove the kid who seems to be the slowest
That's a fear roll.
and make sure that you run ahead of him? That's a fear roll. The success or failures you generate from your roll then become narrative facts you can mention.
Yep.
So in escaping, me as the GM, I might see I have 3 successes, and you as the kid running away, you have 2. Having 1, then maybe I might decide, okay, you get to dictate your first fact.
Which is terrible because it means you're gonna get a double fact at the end. But then I'll say something that
Example.
there's a what's this? Oh, that there is a ragged curtain hanging out the window that I think I can climb down.
Then I mention as you climb out the window, your shirt is caught in the broken glass. So that's 1 fact each so far, and then you continue.
Yeah, but I'm not. I'm dexterous enough that I don't get injured by the glass, and I continue down.
You slip down, escaping my grasp, but then you hit the ground painfully, spraining your ankle.
See, I hate it when it's a double fact.
And that's how the game is played. As the game progresses, the story goes on. The kids try to find a way to get out of this town. They find a way to defeat the grinning man, or they don't. And that's what makes this game so awesome.
And it's super terrifying because, again, number 1, you're kids. Number 2, you are kids who went to bed and woke up in this world. So you are all in your night clothes.
Yes.
You do not have useful things with you. And then every time you play this game, it always starts with you look out the window and then you see the street is filled with other kids running away.
Mm-hmm. And it's scarier if you realize they're running away from where you are.
Yes.
Then you realize, wait, what's here?
So very, very intense game. And I think just the decision to make it that you're playing children changed so much. And it just made things
in our many Shower Merchant games, Machen games, I don't know what's the right word to pronounce it. We've explored it in different ways. We've had players know each other from the start. So they're neighbors or they're friends. And what are we all doing here? But then we've tried it wherein they're all complete strangers from different parts of the world.
Yes.
And there was that, people started sharing their own folk tales of what type of nightmarish
I think we've
person
even done
this could
one
be.
where like it's even different time settings.
Yes.
But they all just keep ending up here.
And, one doesn't remember modern technology because she's actually from, an earlier era, but she's here as well. And, oh man, it's such a great game. The book itself is not super detailed, but it has so much content that will inspire your imagination to go so many different ways. If you want something less horror, more survival, but still evoking the same children in a world where there are no adults to help you, Jim Pinto has a similar game. Oh my god, I forgot the name. We played it. Ah. But since I can't remember that one, I shall pivot to a different Jim Pinto game. Again, it's a collection. And it is his Praxis line of the Black Sun,
Monk.
the Black Monk games.
Black Sun is a criminal organization in the Star Wars universe.
So the Black Monk is a series of different games. Oh, I included other non-Black Monk games. Yeah. So the Black Monk is a setting wherein everyone is in this dark fantasy world wherein time doesn't seem to move. The people all seem to be stuck in this place.
Mitch just says, I had the German game. Okay.
And an enigmatic figure called the Black Monk visits every now and then. Whenever the Black Monk visits, everything changes. And what makes this game so amazing is that it uses horror elements despite not having a GM. Everyone takes the responsibility of bringing the story around.
Yes.
And everyone has the power to inject the horror moments when they want to. You have one? You want to share more about Black Monk?
No, okay.
The Black Monk comes with pre-created character concepts, which are part of the fact that they were designed to be zero prep. You can literally play a game of Black Monk, even if you've never really played it before, without knowing anything about the world, and it will still work. Part of what makes the character concepts really, really fun is that they have a list known as scenes. The scenes basically allow you to decide what type of scene you are directing on your turn. Every player has a turn as the director.
So in other words, everybody gets the GM.
Yes.
Sort of.
And let's say on my turn, I might choose, okay, I want to do an interlude. And an interlude is basically my character will be with another character who I share a relationship with, and we go through a scene.
And share our relationship as a game term.
Yeah.
You have to have relationship.
Other types of scenes include interrogations where you get to ask
one player questions another, and it can be the player, it can be the character.
And it's 5 hard questions that cannot be answered with yes or no.
Yes.
They must be answered fully. So it's not, did you kill the king? But why did you kill the king given he was your best friend? And the questions force the story to keep moving. Beyond that, there are what we call milestones. And these lists of milestones are different for every character. Because when you're in a scene, your objective is to find a way to fulfill your milestone.
Yes.
And by fulfilling your milestones, you're actually now all working together to build a story. So for example, here, there might be a milestone mentioned as reciting the 5 laws. As a player, I have no previous information on what the 5 laws are.
Yep.
There's no written rules on what they should be because the game works that way. Knowing I have to recite the 5 laws.
You're going to make them up.
In earlier scenes, I might inject stuff like, wait, we can't do that. The 5 laws do not allow us. And the other players now might start injecting, but the first law states that we follow the leader. And since the game is all about everyone joining and telling the story,
yes, and
you never say no. It's always yes and. So it might be true, but that was appended to be not applicable in times of duress.
Which is nice. Silly. But,
so the game is amazing that way, and surprisingly, it has still been quite horrific in many of our scenes because we know the Black Monk is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game that practices open secrets. So if I wanted to kill the other character, everyone in the table knows.
Yeah.
And that's because they have the power to inject that further in the story.
And even if you kill off the character, that doesn't mean that we can't have interludes that took place before.
They could be flashbacks, they could
yeah.
be vignettes.
They could be the narration, these darn soliloquy type scenes. It's funny.
Or it could even be, the dead character wakes up.
Yeah.
And, maybe the Black Monk brought them back. So the Black Monk books, amazing, tremendously very quick to play, zero prep.
Oh my gosh, I'm yawning.
And so far we've learned it can be played online.
Yes, we found a way to play Praxis games online. It's not easy, but it's possible.
I'll go now to the last two, unless there's anything else you want to add.
Nope, it's okay.
So the second to the last one is another digital one. And
I have to get
is
the tab.
Don't Rest Your Head. And Don't Rest Your Head is a game that hit our radar because we were looking for more interesting games for our 12 new games per year. And the premise of Don't Rest Your Head is quite remarkable. The premise is you have learned, similar to Cult, that the world is not what people think it is. There is an illusion, or there is a lie cast upon the world that others cannot see. But the reason you're able to see it is because you haven't been sleeping. And this lack of sleep has cracked something. With this breaking of sleep, you've unlocked strange powers. So like maybe my power is I can now unlock any door as long as I turn the knob. Rocky's strange power might be he can he can walk up walls and carry anyone with him. And these strange powers get more evocative as the game progresses, but only exist and only grow stronger so long as you don't rest.
Yeah, that's the problem. I feel sad that the board game, the card game, did not capture this mood at all, because it was a deck building game. You all start with the same cards. You gather cards together, but the cards didn't seem like particularly thematic in that regard, and it didn't build. Okay, don't put it on the edge.
Yeah,
it's too heavy.
I'm worried for the table.
It just didn't. So, but the RPG is a lot richer, and it's just sad to think that the two are related.
That's true. The RPG is very interesting as well because it tries to offer a bunch of other books that have a similar naming convention.
Yeah.
Don't Look Back. Don't Look Back as the card game. Don't Rest Your Head. Don't Close Your Eyes, I think was the other one. But the books themselves are tremendously useful for nightmarish moments if you just want ideas. And in many cases, you might even want to use them to inspire yourself when you play other games. And that brings us to the last game, which I have as a physical book. But I realized there is one more system I totally neglected to add.
Which one?
The Alien role-playing game.
Oh, okay. To be fair, there's a lot of dread there.
That's very well done too.
There's a lot of tension in the Alien game.
The Alien role-playing game was a game released, I think, within the last 2 years.
Yeah, that was pre-pandemic.
It uses a dice system called Panic Dice, wherein when you face things that are beyond normal, you roll the Panic Dice, and they will force you to do actions you might not want to do.
Yes.
Beyond that, it's surprisingly a robust system that is a love letter to the Alien franchise, but not aliens. It's not well designed for combat space marine stories.
Yeah, it's really the first Alien, which was of the Alien movies was the most horror.
And then it has 2 game modes. There's the normal game mode wherein you play like a campaign, you gain experience, you better your character. But then there's the cinematic mode, which is I think the best way to play it.
Because then it's a story.
You play it as a story. If you die, you actually get a different character to continue playing, which is anyone else in the cast. And then you have character secrets.
Yeah.
And as you unlock these character secrets, you learn more about what you're supposed to do in the story. So it's pretty well done. So the last one And I will have to admit the bias in the
Okay,
reason.
let me just. Wasn't it this?
I think it's
I think
there.
it's this.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. I wasn't sure where I placed it. Yes, there you go. Such a beautiful book. Look at that, Alien. And then let's open to look at some art. For fans of the movies, yeah, look at that. It's
You
a
got a
star
map of the star map. Yep.
And then let's find one of the nice art pieces.
It is an expensive book, and it's like hard to photocopy because it's printed on black.
Yeah,
It's like one of those.
it's one of those. I know. I'll make sure you can't photocopy it. Oh my gosh, it's like super dark. So there's a sample of the artwork. There's a sample of the page. Yeah, and then let's try to show something with the table there. Yeah.
And it's funny, yeah, because the GM in the game is called the Game Mother. Like, mother.
Because Mother was the computer system in the Alien franchise.
Yes.
The book does have an attempt at a timetable, but it kind of does not successfully have everything from the later movies such as Prometheus. So
May
going
not
back,
be a bad thing.
going back to our finale, it will have to be by extension Call of Cthulhu, but it's because of specifically the Curse of the Yellow Sign, which was the adventures that was using the Call of Cthulhu system that were written by John Wick. This was the Curse of the Yellow Sign collection book, which is made of three adventures, which is Act 1, digging of a dead god, Act 2, calling for the king, and Act 3, Archimedes 7, which is three different timelines when a group of investigators, or in this case, people, not investigators,
Yeah.
encounter the king with the pallid mask in their own way. The first story deals with players playing Nazi soldiers, or rather, the prelude to Nazis.
So they're German soldiers.
Yeah, the German soldiers, as they try to break open this ancient tomb that might have secrets that can be useful for their plans in the future. The second story has players being thespians, actors, and performers who have gathered to do a reading of the play regarding the I think the king. I forgot the name of the play. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the play. The King in Yellow. There you go. And things start to happen as they read the script. And yes, the book actually has script pages you can print out so you can hand them to the players to go through a reading as you play. And then the third one, which is Archimedes 7, is very much passengers minus the ick boyfriend abusive guy moments.
Okay, Passengers the movie.
Yeah, with a scary elder god twist added to it. You're basically people on a ship that have awoken because things have gone wrong somehow in the automated systems, and you discover how bad things have gotten, and they may be related to this massive idol that you're dragging in space behind you. Um, in the end, we're not fans of Call of Cthulhu as a whole.
Yeah, it's hard.
And it's not that it's a bad game, because it's the same game system in many ways as Pendragon.
Yes.
But I guess we never really were that attached to the lore,
Mm.
the more specific Lovecraftian lore, and we kind of liked more some of the more modern reinterpretations of the material. So like um, we loved True Detective.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
we love the comic explorations of the Lovecraftian stories. This one we love, but in terms of the more classic ones like the Masks of Nyarlathotep and the like, we haven't really gotten a chance to explore them, and maybe we just need the right keeper to give us that taste. of that game. So, Call of Cthulhu is the last on our list, but more specifically, the Curse of the Yellow Sign is the one on the top of the heap. So yeah, that is definitely 1.5 hours of talking about
I
horror.
figured this would be a long
games.
episode.
We wanted to keep it shorter. I'm so sorry, but I got too excited. And it's my week. I have the right to be excited.
It's still be weak.
See, I'm so excited that look, there are now two eggs behind me, not just one. So, is there any last things you'd like to share?
Despite my disdain for horror movies, but playing through horror games, horror RPGs, is
Mhm.
actually still um, isn't as bad. I mean, like there's still dread and there's still tension and fear and disturbing moments and sur- terrible, dark
Mm.
revelations. But I think it's the format, whatever the medium, helps me explore these stories better than I would as a horror movie.
Mhm.
Despite the fact that my imagination is probably more terrifying than most visual effects. So I mean, as is the nature of human imagination.
Yes.
You'll always think of the anything scarier for you. But yeah, but it's been interesting. That's why we keep playing. I mean, like currently, in terms of our active rotation of games, we still have a vampire game as part
Mhm.
of that rotation. We had to pause our Wraith game because the pandemic was getting too heavy and too close to like real life. So
Because in Wraith, you're playing ghosts and hitting normal people destroys part of your essence.
yeah, so you spend your time avoiding touching other people.
And we
Does
were
that
like,
sound familiar?
or locking yourself in a room so that people can't touch you or reach
Mm.
you. So yeah, it started to feel too close to home. Um, I would also add that horror rarely works unless everyone agrees to be playing a horror game.
Yeah, there's a social contract to that, and like
And
you have to agree to the tone, and this is how it's gonna go, and because and I'm sure I'm stealing your words, but
yeah,
Toby's about to say that because the usual defense against
yes.
tension and fear is humor,
Mhm.
and
Because it helps diffuse it.
it helps diffuse it,
It helps
but
make it feel
it
like
breaks the mood. So if you're going to play a horror game, but then you're gonna wisecrack through the whole thing because you don't want to embrace the horror, then it just ruins the game, or at least you don't achieve that effect.
Hey, Luis, thanks for joining us. I just noticed your message. He's from a different time zone entirely.
No, okay,
And then
it is that late.
what else about horror? So it needs people to be willing to play it. There's always the importance in making sure everyone is at least aware to some degree of what to expect and what to go through.
Yeah,
And especially now in this time we're in, um, people are, you know, exploring games in so many different ways. Before it was very strategic, but now we have simulationists, we have emotional, we have pathos related. The need to have time to disengage, to go through,
to
to
process.
process, to offload, to check in on each other is very important. So if ever you choose to do a horror game, make sure you check in with each other to make sure you are all in the same page, to make sure you identify your lines and veils, what are topics we shouldn't touch on, what are topics we can touch on. Will there be ways to encourage each other to keep going because it's still a safe space, or whether to slow down and stop because it's touching on stuff? And it's hard to preempt everything. Um, I will just share that I've had my moments of I love horror, I love um, gory stuff, but then I was hanging out with friends at one point, and one was sharing information about a medical procedure they had, and I fainted because you know, it just hit me that hard. And it was odd for me because I myself did not understand why I was getting affected. So it's stuff like that. You will need to make sure you have these precautions ready, and you'll be able to have ways to communicate with each other when you explore horror. Beyond that, I will say that the other thing I love about horror, and it's one of the reasons why I really enjoy watching horror, is because it at least gives you the belief that there are things, no matter how bad they are, you can overcome them.
Yeah,
And whether it's in the fictional sense, meaning the monster can be defeated, or in the realistic sense, meaning it's scary, then I turn it off.
Hmm.
I have that power. That's where I find the strength and the empowerment that comes from horror. Um, I've always hated this helpless feeling of things beyond my control, and horror allows me that sanctuary that, as bad as these things can seem to get, they're within my control. So that might be a possible reason for you to check out horror if you haven't really thought you'd be interested in it and you don't know why you'd want to try it.
Sam cites, yes, you really have to set those hard limits. So yeah, the clear guidelines at the beginning. Mitch shares that her first RPG was Shower Motion, the horror one with kids, and she enjoyed it and appreciates the time that Toby took to make sure everybody was okay. Yeah, and I think that's been critical also throughout. And then like, I mean, my first RPG experience with Toby was I was a demon. I was a demon hunter, the whatever summoner, and oh my god, it was a slow progression to like get to that because I started mortal
And you didn't know about
and I didn't
the
know what my
legacy.
ability would be. Yeah, yeah. So it took a while. But yeah, then since then we've like gone through many different stories together, and it's been quite the wild ride. And as much as I like, I'm a science fiction person. I wouldn't necessarily say science fiction RPGs are my favorite. The horror ones have had some of the best stories. I will admit.
And I guess to wrap up this episode, we do try to explore more games and new games every year.
Oh yes.
We try to run one-shot games with completely new systems. Just because me, I have that personal. I try to hit 12 new games every year. So if you're
I'm just along for the ride.
So if you're interested in trying systems, whether it's any of these or it's other systems that you've read about, like one of the ones that has been intriguing me is one called Harlem Unbound,
Okay.
which is very much close to what we're watching now.
Oh, we're watching them
because
on Amazon Prime.
it does explore the racism inherent with the Lovecraftian elements of horror,
Okay.
but then introduces information on how you can do it respectfully and properly and safely. So it's an interesting book. And there are many, many other games out there that are worth the exploration. I know I still dream of someday being able to run the farm, but I doubt I'll ever find the right time and the right group for it, because it's literally having a group of players captured by a serial killer and try to decide who to sacrifice to stay alive. So it's not light material at all. But yeah, let us know if you're interested in trying games. Message us if you want to play, and who knows, maybe we can schedule a one shot or something.
Even if it's just an online one.
Yes.
Because that's all we game. That's all our games now. All our games are online.
And it's not limited to horror games.
Oh yeah. But today it's Toby Day, so we're gonna talk about horror.
But yeah, we've talked about horror for an hour and a half. I'm so happy.
It's a movie.
So will there be a Snyder cut of this stuff?
No. For that you have to go in person.
But that's all the time we had for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a lot of fun, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
For questions or suggestions for future episodes, you can fill up the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. You can follow us on Twitter, all Toby No Shade, RG Suniko.
You can also check out our blog, baduypride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. And what did you think about the games that we covered? Your encounters with horror games, what worked, what didn't? Leave a comment. And be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. You're going to say something?
Tomorrow is our birthday hangout.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even have like a good plan. It's like, I don't know, we're just going to sit in front of the
There's
computer.
no clear topic for tomorrow's episode, but it's our virtual celebration of my birthday. So please do join us tomorrow if you can. Bring your own drinks and enjoy your own food, but let's share stories and let's have fun tomorrow.
Yep.
But for now,
This is Rocky.
and this is Toby.
And this is Baduy.
That was a bit wrong.
It totally went. It got prompted the wrong
Yeah, by
way.
this. Thanks for watching.
There's also this pile of books in the middle that is like totally breaking my sideline. And like, I don't know.
Thank you for